Good morning, everyone. This is Don Medellin with South Florida Water Management District. We'll get started in just a couple more minutes. We got a number of people who are still joining us, so we'll get started in just a minute or two. All right, this is Don Medellin with the South Florida Water Management District. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I've got 10:01, so I'm sure there'll be a few more people joining us, but let me just first say that we certainly appreciate your participation in this 5th Rural Development Workshop for the Kissimmee Water Reservations. And certainly it's been a challenge doing these more remotely through Zoom than our face-to-face typical workshops, but we've really had excellent participation through these virtual meetings and workshops, so it's really worked out to the better for many people. So I wanted to kind of go through our agenda this morning. We'll have just go over the basics regarding water reservations, and again, we go over the basics just to make sure those of you who have not joined us for our previous workshops that they understand the basics about water reservations. We'll also provide a summary of the revisions to the technical document, and then a summary of revisions to the draft rules. And then at that time, we'll take public comment, and then go over the next steps, and then we'll adjourn. So with that, let me just give you a little bit of the basics and the format today for the Zoom for engaging with us. If you look at the Q&A feature on the Zoom toolbar, we would ask that you submit one or more questions to us throughout the workshop. And this is really the only way that you'll be able to engage with us during the workshop. So along with the public comment period, you can ask a question at any time. Our goal is to try and pause briefly after each of the presentation segments, and then we'll see if there are any questions, and then we'll have a public comment period at the end of the agenda to wrap up any of the questions that weren't answered. So the goal is to read the questions out loud and then provide live answers so that everybody can not only hear the question, but also the live answer from our staff. And we would ask that you try and be as specific as possible for each question and indicate the slide number if possible that you're referring to. That way we can be sure we can give you the answer that you need and have the correct staff answer your question. Also, there is the ability on the Q&A feature to do an upvote for a similar question, and you can click on the thumbs up button, and that question would be prioritized upward. So with that, those are the logistics for today. Again, appreciate everybody participating. And with that, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to turn it over to Tony Edwards, and she's going to give an overview on the water reservation. Tony?
Thank you, Don, and good morning, everybody. Well, as we have done for all of our previous project workshops, I'm going to provide you a brief background information on reservations. Next slide. Section 373.223, subparent 4 of the Florida statutes provides authority to develop and adopt water reservations. Water reservations are ultimately adopted in Chapter 40E10 of the Florida Administrative Code. They're adopted for the protection of fish and wildlife or public health and safety. The Kissimmee River and Chain of Lakes reservations will be for the protection of fish and wildlife, as are all of the other reservations the district has adopted to date. Water reserved cannot be used for consumptive uses. The conditions of a reservation are implemented in the applicant's handbook for water use permit applications. Next slide. The Kissimmee Water Reservation area is rather huge. It's a little over 172,000 acres. And the water bodies are located within two water supply planning areas. The Upper Kissimmee Basin, which is part of the Central Florida Water Initiative planning area, as well as the Lower Kissimmee Basin planning area. These are shown on the figure to the right within the green and the orange lines. The upper chain of lakes and the headwaters revitalization lakes provide most of the water for the Kissimmee River. So these water reservations will also protect the Kissimmee River Restoration Project, which is an ongoing project to restore the natural course of the Kissimmee River. Next slide. The reservation water bodies are in three groups. The first are the upper chain of lakes, shown in pink, which includes the lakes that you see there, as well as the canals that connect them. The second group are the headwater revitalization lakes, Lakes Kissimmee, Cypress, Hatchinaha, and Tiger, as well as the canals that interconnect them. And the third group is the Kissimmee River and floodplain, which of course includes the Kissimmee River, from the S65 water control structure on the north end to the S65E structure on the south end. This group also includes the C38 canal, the Istapoga Canal and floodplain, and a number of remnant river channels. On the map, you'll see some water bodies that are shown in gray. Those are contributing water bodies. They contribute water to the reservation water bodies. Next slide. The water that's proposed for reservation includes both surface water and groundwater. In the upper chain of lakes, surface water up to specific stages will be reserved. All surface water in the Kissimmee River and the headwaters lakes will be reserved. And surface water in contributing water bodies will be reserved in quantities required for the protection of fish and wildlife. Groundwater contributed to both the reservation and contributing water bodies will also be reserved in quantities required for the protection of fish and wildlife. And that concludes our brief overview. I'll turn it back to Don.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And I didn't introduce myself at the beginning. My name is Don Medellin, or maybe I did and just missed that. I'm with the Applied Sciences Bureau, and I am the project manager for the Kissimmee Water Reservations. And my overview today for the technical documents, I'm going to go through this by chapter just to kind of highlight the changes that have occurred since the June 9th workshop. And I will tell you that the bulk of the changes that are associated with the technical document, as well as Nick Fatani's presentation regarding the rule changes, have been geared toward addressing many of the public comments that we've received and many of the stakeholder meetings that we've had with folks. So I wanted to lay that out and make sure you understand that we have been doing our best to try and be receptive to the comments that we've received and address those accordingly. So in chapters 1 and 2, the revisions we have in figure 1-1, that figure was revised to show all the contributing water bodies. There was concerns that portions of the Shingle Creek contributing water bodies were not all shown, so we shifted that whole figure down a little bit. Figure 1-2 was revised, primarily just reformatted to fit the page better. Section 1.3.3, we added a new paragraph to address the recent changes regarding the Central Florida Water Initiative planning process. There's been a number of changes and updates that we wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of, and that the CFWI planning process is now going through a rule development process where DEP, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, is the lead agency on that rulemaking process. So we just wanted to give everybody an update on where that process is. Section 2.1, we reorganized the information regarding water reservations. And then in section 2.2, we added references to the new appendices G and H, which I'll get to in just a moment. The revisions to Chapter 3, Section 3.2, we revised figures for the Upper and Lower Kissimmee planning regions and tried to make sure that all of those acreages were correct. In Figure 3-3, that figure was revised again to show all of the contributing areas. There were some concerns about where many of the contributing areas terminated, and so what we did is we went back into our rules and the maps and clearly identified where those contributing water bodies terminated, so that there is a roadway or some demarcation so that people understand exactly where that contributing water body terminates. Figures 3-4 through 3-12, the figure captions were changed to eliminate confusion for the water reservation water bodies. There was concern that some water reservation water bodies didn't show certain things, and so what we tried to clarify that for each water reservation water body that you're looking at, the figure for that specific reservation water body only applies to that specific reservation water body. So we've added a caption there to try and explain that. In section 3.5.3.1, we added additional information regarding the Diston Canal for Lakes Hart and Mary Jane. In section 3.5.3.2, we added additional watershed information regarding the information surrounding lakes Myrtle, Preston, and Joel. That watershed information is more detailed in that particular section. And then figure 3-8 was added to give a pictorial to show a picture, a better picture of the watersheds and direction of surface water flows for those lakes as well. The revisions to chapters 4 and 5, section 4.3.1.1, we added additional information to clarify how the vegetation data was developed for the system-wide approach, and that we considered additional studies. In sections 5.3.1 and 5.3.2, we added additional text to clarify the extent of the water reservation water bodies, that it extends to the regulated high stage. There were some concerns from many of the comments we received that there was confusion about exactly how far out we were regulating the water reservation water bodies themselves, so we tried to clarify that the water reservations themselves is only designed to be regulated to the regulated high of those particular reservation water bodies. In section 5.4.1, we revised the permitting information to add and added a sentence to state that staff's analysis of the withdrawals showed that existing legal uses are not contrary to the public interest. Apparently that was not clear, and certainly our analysis proved that to be true. So we made a statement to that effect. And then in Table 5-1, we updated the permit information to correct some of the minor changes based on feedback we received from you through the comment process. And then revisions to the appendices. We've added 2 new appendices here. Appendix G, which is a summary of public comments, questions, and district responses on the water reservation. And then Appendix H is the public comment letters that we received after the rule development workshops numbers 3 and 4. And so that concludes the revisions that we've made to the technical document. I hope and trust that you all have had a chance to review that information. We've had it out there available at least a week before the workshop, so hopefully you've had a chance to review that along with the draft rules. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nick Fatani. Nick?
Okay, thank you, Don. This is Nick Vitani. Welcome everyone to our 5th public workshop, and I'm a section leader in the Water Use Bureau in the Regulation Division, and I oversee permitting in Lower East Coast and Central Florida region. So I'm going to go over what we've changed and revised since the last public workshop based on the public comments that we've gotten. We've had very productive meetings with the stakeholders, and it's been a great collaborative effort. So I appreciate all of the comments that we've received, and it's been a good experience working with everyone to try to come up with the best possible rule we can. So I'm going to start out with the revisions to the 40E10, the reservation rule. Then I'll go to the applicant's handbook. Okay, so 40E10, we added this language here to clarify the scope of the reservation. These water reservation rules do not adjudicate property rights or dictate the operation of the CNSF project. Another change, revision we made to 40E10.0711C is we clarified that the Headwaters Revitalization Lakes, there's not a reservation schedule for the Headwaters Revitalization Lakes, it's just a regulation schedule. So we took that reference out to water reservation stages. And this language was added in due to comments from the public stakeholders on what if the regulation schedule changes. Well, this language is already a directive in the statute, but we put it in here that the reservation contained in this rule incorporated reference shall be revised pursuant to 373.223 parentheses 4 in light of changed conditions or new information. So the reservation rule could be revised if there's changed conditions, changed regulation schedules, and that's a directive by statute. Okay, so this is the graph of the Headwaters Revitalization Lakes regulation schedule, and similar to earlier revision, we do not have a reservation level, reservation line associated with this, so we took out the reference to a reservation line, just a regulation schedule here. And this particular change in the caption for this and all of the other Upper Chain of Lakes water body regulation and reservation schedules was made. We specified the structure or monitoring location where the reservation line was made. So we did the same change. We identified each structure at for each specific Upper Chain of Lakes water body. So I didn't go through and show all of the schedules here, but we did this for every Upper Chain of Lakes water body, specified the structure where the data came from. Okay, now on to the applicant's handbook. Some of the comments we got. This was in response to clarifying direct withdrawals of surface water and indirect withdrawals of groundwater. These are defined terms in the applicant's handbook, so we capitalize them. And to clarify the withdrawals from Florida Aquifer System, we specified Florida Aquifer System wells. So withdrawals from Florida Aquifer System wells do not use reserved water. And in addition, we had comments, what do we do with dewatering in the area of the reservation? So we added this, one of the following uses do not use reserved water, and it's withdrawals that are short-term dewatering that qualify for a general permit by rule, so those do not use reserved water. So this change in the applicant's handbook is for the additional criteria for issuance of permits. And when a permittee is required to look at its compatibility or usage under the reservation rule, they have to do the two downstream checks. One is the reservation schedule in the upper chain of lakes, and then the downstream check would be the Okeechobee constraint, we call it. It's so when any releases from Lake Okeechobee are being made, then they have to meet that criteria as well. So we had questions on, well, what constitutes a release from Lake Okeechobee? And so we added this here to specify that the downstream check for Lake Okeechobee will only occur when Lake Okeechobee stage is within or above the low subband of the Lake Okeechobee regulation schedule. That's in LORS 2008. And releases from Lake Okeechobee are being made to either the Caloosahatchee River at these S77 and S79, or the St. Lucie estuary at S308 and S80. And the applicant shall refer to DB Hydro for those stations to determine if releases are being made. So that gives us a clear specification on checking the downstream check for Lake Okeechobee releases. And for the daily daily withdrawals, we have the form that is used to report the withdrawals, and we just put the form number and referenced it here in this portion of the applicant's handbook. It's form 1393. And the same thing for the surface water withdrawals. So it's the same form is used, and we added that in here. So for the specific conditions or special permit conditions, so these are example permit conditions that are added to specific permits. And the requirements are, of course, the reservation schedule in the upper chain of lakes, and then the downstream check is the Lake Okeechobee. And so this is consistent with the previous earlier comment that this is the methodology for determining what constitutes the satisfying of the Lake Okeechobee release. So this is consistent with the previous language. This is how the permittee would check for the downstream protection of downstream users. So if Lake Okeechobee's discharges are occurring through either the Caloosahatchee River at S77 and S79, or St. Lucie estuary at S308 and S80, then they would be able to satisfy that requirement, and they refer to DB Hydro for those monitoring stations to see if releases are being made. And in the special conditions, when discharges are being made by the district, for example, during a spring recession, or CNSF, or flood control, or operations and maintenance of CNSF projects, environmental releases, spring recession, the permittee shall request authorization to conduct such daily withdrawals using Form 1393. So this is the form that a permittee would use once the district notifies permittees that we're making a release for any of these purposes here. And this is a temporary request for withdrawal under these specific circumstances. So I'll show the form in a minute. And here's the form. So this is the same form. We revised it a little slightly. We added for the withdrawals, we wanted to know the total rated capacity of the withdrawal facilities, because that gives us an idea of how much water would be withdrawn during spring recession or other special events that are occurring. And then this is the form that the permittee could submit to us if they would desire to make a withdrawal during these periods. And we would complete it and send it back to the permittee with any specific conditions at the bottom of this form, such as the duration, the date you can begin and stop, or a level constraint that you can withdraw from this period to this period, and maybe until a level at this structure reaches whatever elevation, and then you must stop. And these withdrawals would still need to be reported on the other form that has the daily reporting forms. And I think that's it for my section.
That's it. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. And at this time, we're going to go ahead and take public comments. So as we indicated at the beginning of the workshop, if you would look at your Q&A feature and type in any questions that you have, we'll read those questions out loud and then provide live answers for you. So I'm going to ask Camille if we have any public comments or questions at this point. Camille?
Hi, Don. We do have one question that Jennifer Brown is going to take. It's from David Gore, and we may need some additional details. So, Mr. Gore, if you can just let us know if your question hasn't been completely addressed. But the question is, does South Florida Water Management District control levels and discharges of all or some of the conveyance systems, including the headwater systems? Jennifer?
Okay, so it's Jennifer. The CNSF system, a lot of these lakes and the conveyance features. Don, could you go back to earlier in the presentation, the graph where you bracket the headwaters and the upper chain? There you go. So the major lakes in purple and aqua and lavender and the connecting conveyance systems, those are all part of the CNSF project built by the Corps, and the district is the local sponsor. And so because we have a local sponsor, we are obligated to operate in accordance with the water control plan and the regulation schedule developed for these lakes. And so there is a seasonality to those water levels in these lakes. And once the regulation schedule is reached, or, we try to, sometimes make sure that it's not reached in advance of inclement weather coming on, we'll make discharges, and hopefully those, those discharges should be within the range prescribed in the water control plans developed by the Corps with the assistance of the district.
Okay, sorry. We do have a follow-up question from Mr. Gore. Who and how or what a natural level or flow is determined to protect systems?
Zach, I'm going to ask Zach Welch to answer that question as it relates to the water reservation lines. Zach, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, thanks, Don. This is Zach Welch. I work in the Lake and River Ecosystem Section at the district. The question, I assume, relates to how the water reservation lines are determined for each individual system. And that, as described in the document, uses a review of the historical lake stages the amount of water level fluctuations, where water levels occurred historically and currently, drives those plant communities on the shorelines and the fish and wildlife communities that use those habitats. And so we protect the ability of lakes to reach the same high stages, which are determined essentially by the regulation schedule maxes on each water body. We protect their ability to maintain the same lows that are essentially regulated by the same regulation schedules on May 31 of each year. And then the transitions between those highs and lows are kind of determined by the variability and hydrology in each water body. So we're essentially protecting the different hydro periods or durations of flooding that the different communities have on the water bodies. Hopefully that answers the question. If you meant something differently, please follow up.
Thanks, Zach.
Okay, we have another question, and Dawn, I believe this one is one that you can answer. Per 40E 10.071, if the regulation schedule is changed for a particular chain of lakes, would the reservation line elevations be automatically revised consistent with the new regulation schedule for that system? Or is there a process that will need to occur to review and revise the reservation elevation? Actually, Jennifer is indicating she'd like to answer. So go ahead, Jennifer.
Right. So any revision to the water reservation lines would be a new rulemaking process. And so we would be here doing this all over again with all of you, either in person or on Zoom, depending on the conditions. But yes, it's, an analysis would need to be done. The science would need to be reviewed. The new regulation schedule, once it becomes effective, we would have to review that as well. And changes to these rules, should they be necessary, is also a rulemaking process.
Okay, we have another question from Paul Gray. The reservation lakes have an area of 170,000 acres, and the Kissimmee Chain of Lakes region is 1 million acres, leaving 830,000 acres of water unprotected by the reservation. This appears to leave the lakes vulnerable to having their water taken before it flows to them and could prevent them from filling. Are there protections to ensure water outside the lakes can reach the lakes to fill them?
Okay, I'll go ahead and take that question.
Okay, thanks.
Camille. This is Don Medella. Paul, I certainly appreciate the comment and question. Just to give you an idea, as you can see from the map that's shown, part of the reservation effort takes into account the contributing water bodies, and these are one of the things we found through our technical analysis is that we needed to protect the inflows that go into these water reservation lakes. The 172,000 that Tony Edwards referred to in her presentation just refers to the reservation water bodies themselves. So it doesn't include the contributing areas, as I recall, so that would take into account to make sure the gray areas that you see outside of these reservation water bodies are part of this rural development effort and designed to ensure that the reservation water bodies themselves are filled and make sure that the natural filling occurs, because one of the things we found through our evaluations is that if we didn't protect the contributing water bodies going into these lakes, we would not be able to, in some cases, get back up to the refill levels in the water reservation lines that are needed for the protection of fish and wildlife. So yes, these gray areas are critically important to the water reservation water bodies as well as the river. And so they are regulated as part of this rule development effort. So Dr. Gray, I hope that answers your question, but we have thought about that, and that this is one of the major revisions that we have revised since our 2014 effort after receiving multiple public comments during that period in going through the water reservation.
Okay, Don, we have one more question from Richard Weisskopf, which addresses nutrients. So I believe it's outside the scope, but I'll read the question. Did I miss it, or did you address the nutrient runoff and phosphorus and nitrogen levels, and how much reaches Lake Okeechobee, or will these questions be answered later in the workshop?
Camille, I'll go ahead and take that question. To answer your question, this water reservation, it really just deals with the quantification of water needed to protect fish and wildlife to ensure that those species are, sustained and not impacted through future withdrawals of water from these reservation water bodies or the contributing water bodies. Water quality is dealt with through the district, another effort that the district is doing in coordination with DEP and the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Affairs. So they are working on that particular initiative to address water quality issues, but for the most part, it really is outside of the scope of this water reservation. So hopefully that answers your questions. If anybody else has any additional questions, we encourage you to go ahead and type it into the Q&A feature on Zoom, and we'll go ahead and answer those at this point in time. Camille, do we have any additional questions or comments?
No, I don't see any additional. Okay, let me just look at this question really quick. It just popped up. Okay, this is another one from David Gore about CFWI. It appears to me that this plan and the control of usable water volume is mostly for the benefit of areas outside the CFWI. Don, would you like to address that?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and address that. It's really not designed, it's really, this whole water reservation is really designed with the protection of fish and wildlife throughout this entire watershed. So it's not just about the Kissimmee River, and it's not just about the areas in the upper chain of lakes. It's really looking holistically at this entire system to make sure that the protection of fish and wildlife is taken into account with this water reservation effort. Now, I will say that one of the complicating things associated with this rule that we have worked through with multiple stakeholders is to address when can water be allocated, especially in the upper chain of lakes or contributing water bodies, to ensure that those withdrawals do not affect or impact fish and wildlife. And so what we've crafted into this water reservation rule is water reservation lines in the upper chain of lakes that Zach referred to previously, to ensure that when the water stages in the particular water bodies, and each water body has a specific and unique water reservation line based on historical stages, as Zach indicated, but when they are above that stage needed for fish and wildlife, at that point, water withdrawals could occur, and that would be a safe withdrawal without impacting fish and wildlife. So that's one of the things that we have crafted into this rule.
Okay, there are no more questions. We see that Mr. Weisskopf has his hand raised, and if you have an additional question, please just go ahead and type it in the Q&A and we'll read that out. There is an additional question from David Gore, a follow-up. How about the Southern water users benefit?
I'm not sure I understand the question that David Gore is asking, but I can tell you, if you're talking about the southern end of the watershed, there is the ability to withdraw water under certain conditions from contributing water bodies. And again, it has to be above the regulation schedule, the headwaters regulation schedule, in order to make those withdrawals from the contributing water bodies at the south end of the system. So hopefully that answers Mr. Gore's question. And you said there was one other question?
Nope, that's it. Apparently, Mr. Weisskopf's question was addressed. So
okay, perfect. All right, well, I'm going to move forward to the presentation material for the next segment. All right, so moving on to where we're headed next with the next steps. Just wanted to keep you all informed so you know how to engage with us through this continued rule development process. We've had the workshop today. We're anticipating getting the CERC evaluation done toward the end of September. And that is the statement of estimated regulatory cost. Is basically a statutory requirement where the district, when we do a new rule development effort, that we take into account what is the economic impact to small businesses or governments. And so all of that is taken into account through our CERC evaluation. And so we will have that done toward the end of September. We are planning to take this rule and the notice of proposed rule to the October 8th governing board meeting. And once that occurs, assuming there's no changes made and no public hearing is requested, we would have an effective date of the rule on December 3rd before the end of this year. So we'd ask that you would submit your public comments to us no later than Thursday, September 24th, so that we can incorporate those comments into and take those into consideration before we go to the governing board meeting on October the 8th. And you can submit those comments to Tony Edwards at the email address shown here. And the workshop presentations that you heard today will be posted on our Kissimmee Reservations webpage. Give us a couple working days, and then we hope to have it available just like every other presentation that we've done through the last workshops. And so again, the next opportunity for you to, as the public, to engage with us would be at the October 8th governing board meeting, where we will be taking the notice of proposed rule to the board for action at that time to publish it in the Florida Administrative Register. So to give you a little more information about the Kissimmee Reservations webpage, all of our information, the technical document, the revised technical document, as well as the revised rules, are all out there and posted on our webpage. And many of the public comments that we've received are out there on our web board as well. And if you want to see any of our rules, there is a link there for the current rules that we have on the books currently. And then if you have any questions, certainly you can contact me directly or Tony Edwards, and we'll be glad to answer any questions you might have. So with that, I wanted to say thank you for participating and engaging with us through this rule development process. And it's not over yet. There will be going to notice of proposed rule next with the governing board. And so again, we'd ask that you would get your public comments in by Thursday, September the 24th, so that we can take all of that information into account as we have many of the other comments that we've received from you all. So as Nick indicated, it's been a very productive back and forth dialogue with many of you through this rule development effort, and we've really tried our best to address your questions and comments as best we can. And as you can see through the revisions to the technical document or the draft rules, we've tried our best to address all of the concerns that we can. And so let me just say in closing that I want to thank you again for taking time out of your schedule to meet with us and to go over the workshop today. And there's been a lot of challenging times, and we've had a really good turnout through the rule development process and Zoom process, and it's been very positive and productive. So we do evaluate your input just as we have in the past, so continue to send public comments our way as needed, and then we will take those into consideration as we go forward with the rule development effort. So mark your calendars for the October 8th Governing Board meeting, and once again, I just want to thank you for your time and ask that you continue to remain healthy and safe until we meet again. Thank you, everyone.